All right, welcome in everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Better Fantasy Show. I'm your host, Will Ty, and I'm so pumped to be joined today by Brad Thomas, betting expert and analyst over at NBC Sports. Brad, what's up, my man?
Man, listen, this is crazy. It feels like football season just ended, right? And then now we're already almost at the draft. Pretty soon we'll start to be talking about preseason. I actually think this is kind of funny. I was on DraftKings and I was like looking for some bets, but DraftKings took down all their lines. But what they do have is the first Jets preseason game lines up. So that tells you we're getting closer and closer.
Yep, it's right around the corner. As they say, the NFL season never ends. So with the draft coming up, I mean, gosh, we're almost a week out now. Could you talk a little bit about how you sort of approach the draft from a betting perspective? Are there certain things that you always kind of look to in terms of like, just trends or things like that you sort of like, okay, this is what I see and I'm going to go ahead and bet on this. Like, what's your approach to the
Yeah,
draft?
the draft is interesting from a betting perspective because there's going to be people who have all these different strategies, like these perfect models, these perfect systems, and 90% of that stuff is garbage. And I'll be the first person to say it that, like, when we talk about my bet number five, it's a total guess, right? But if you want to position yourself as a profitable bettor on the draft, don't guess. There are far too many people who spend every single second of their day getting information that you could provide useful. An example I'll say is the Kyler Murray draft. I had this Arizona beat writer who I followed. Make sure you turn their notifications on, whatever beat writer you trust. He said Kyler Murray is going to go number one. His odds were like minus 200. I locked in, I max bet it, and literally within 2 minutes of him tweeting that, it was minus 1,000 and then off the board. So you just got to make sure you have people that you trust, and then learn how to read in between the lines. It's okay that if you're a person who watches lines on the sports books, but ultimately we have to remember that these sports books aren't the ones who are making the selections. The sports books are just kind of positioning themselves to make money. And when we get to my favorite bet of the draft, I'll give an example of exactly what I mean by that. But I think those are the main philosophies. Just make sure you have good information. Don't stare at the odd boards too much because that's not going to tell you the story early on in the draft. And then when it comes last minute, make sure you have those notifications on of your favorite beat writers because they will give you all the information you need, but you have to be faster than the books.
Yeah, that's a great point. And so could you give maybe some examples, Brad, of like some of those beat writers that you really trust and you really listen
Oh
to?
man, off the top of my head, I don't think I have any off the
I
top of
know that
my
was off the
head.
cuff.
Yeah, I listen. It's not that hard to find them. Pretty much, what I would suggest go to like if there's a team that you're interested in, like their draft position. So I'll give the Eagles for example. Like I have a couple on the Eagles where I just go and I type in Eagles on Twitter. You see who has the best information. You follow like three of them and you turn them on. It's an easy way to find it. Just don't find like the guys who you can tell the difference between a beat writer, a guy who works for a real publishing company, or the guy who is like Jalen Hurts lover 35 who just tweets a lot because 90% of the time that guy's not gonna have good information.
So you pretty much just described the difference between me and you. Like you're an actual journalist, and I'm just over here firing off tweets from like my quasi burner account. So I love that. I love that. Okay, so let's do this. Starting from, we're gonna do a top five Brad's best bets for the NFL draft, and we'll start at number five. So your fifth best bet. So the bet that has the fifth likeliest odds to hit, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Okay, let's dive into it. What's number five
Number
for you?
five, listen, so I'm going to be fully transparent that I'm actually on a different bet, and it's something you don't want to do early in draft, in draft breakdown, but this was a more of a field bet that I placed. But as I started to break it down, I pivoted to this, and I'm going to have both tickets. Bijan Robinson to the Eagles at plus 700. I was originally on Cowboys, but I got that at like 15 to 1. And that was literally when they said they were going to cut Zeke, so ages ago now. But I just think the value on this number is too good to pass up. You know, everyone says, and I hate using that term everyone because people want to know who everyone is, but most of the logical betting minds in the draft are saying the Eagles aren't going to take a running back at 10. I don't think they should either. I think the Eagles go maybe cornerback. They might get lucky and one of the D linemen fall to them if there's a heavy rush on quarterbacks early. And if there's a great D lineman available, I don't think they're even going to flirt with the idea of Bijan Robinson. But Bijan Robinson is a chance to be a generational talent. Like if you have a chance to draft a Saquon-esque at 10 and you are having to replace a guy like Miles Sanders, I think you take it. But this is also a bet that's protected by a couple of other scenarios. Let's say the Eagles just can't take Robinson at 10. They can actually trade down and still get Robinson and still get more pieces together so it doesn't feel as much of a reach to them. One thing that I also like that gives me two more options, they also pick at number 30. If Bijan Robinson, I don't think Bijan goes past Tampa. I think Tampa is pretty sure that if Bijan goes to them, they're just going to swing for the fences. They have nothing to lose, but you never know. Tampa could go offensive lineman there. If Bijan falls to 30, they have a chance to get him there. And then last, but certainly not least, I think they could move back up. If Bijan, they think Bijan is their replacement for Sanders, he's the guy that gets them to the Super Bowl again. They could package the 30th and they could package the 62nd to get kind of closer to that 20th range. I think teams will gladly be able to do that. Teams who need more. That gives you three opportunities, three different scenarios where they can land Bijan Robinson at 7-1.
Yeah, and I love that too, because if you think about the Eagles and sort of like the presumptive matchup with the 49ers, right? Like if you look at the sort of like positional, like if you do a guy off, right? Of like who's the best guy and who's the best guy in the room. You know, the Eagles are definitely lacking there at the running back position versus the 49ers with obviously McCaffrey. And so I think the Eagles are stacked, right? They're great everywhere. They don't really have a glaring need, I don't think, at any of these positions. Bijan is obviously a luxury pick, but I mean, dude, pairing Bijan with Jalen Hurts, like, that's silly. That would be, oh my God. I mean, then you have AJ Brown running end arounds behind him, like it would just be nuts. And so I'm on board with that, and I love the price at 700, and I love the fact that you're sort of locking into a team and not a spot. Yeah. So I love that. I love that pick. Who do you got at number 4?
Number 4. Oh, this one, I feel gross saying this because I definitely gave this pick out at a way better price. But as bettors, we have to realize that if something's minus 250, but it has tremendous value, give it like an 80% chance, there's still value on minus 250. And that's Will Anderson to be the first defensive player taken. If you're just a guy who doesn't bet on value, but you just can't bet a minus 250, you could take him as the number 2 overall pick. It's less safe at plus 200. But when I gave this pick out on BetMGM, I gave this on BetMGM and I believe Monument Sports. It was funny because it was prior to the trade of between the Panthers and the Bears.
Panthers and the Bears.
And my philosophy wasn't so much that there wasn't going to be a trade. I said the fact that if the Bears don't trade, they go Will Anderson. And the Bears, and the reasoning behind that, the Bears were last in the NFL in sacks and quarterback pressures. And they couldn't go after, this before the Jalen Carter incident, they couldn't go after Jalen Carter. Because Jalen Carter only accumulated 6 sacks in his entire career. He's a different kind of defensive lineman than an edge rusher. Mm-hmm. So then fast forward, I got to go on the show again after the trade, and they said, do I like Will Anderson? And I said, what? It's probably a 3-man race, including Carter in that. I still like the Anderson at his price. He was in the plus 200s. Then the Carter news happened. And then Anderson graded out pretty well. NFL does some pretty cool next-gen stats. I thought this was pretty compelling. Will Anderson's not the most athletic guy. He's not a freak of nature. He's a football guy who is great tactically, who just knows how to get to the quarterback. But when I looked at his athleticism score, I was wondering if that was going to hurt him. He got a 76 out of 100 in athleticism score, which was 14th among the defensive players. He got 99% production score. And then 90th overall, which is number one in the NFL draft for defensive players. I thought that was compelling enough where he has the body of work from college. He has all the tools in his belt. And also now he has the measurables. We have to remember this is a guy who's getting pressure on the quarterback 23% of the time. I think that he could go second, but I don't want there to be. I don't think it's going to happen, but I don't want there to be this rush on quarterbacks 1, 2, 3, 4, where with what Arizona trying to get out of there. But I think you can't go wrong with Will Anderson. Look at all of the good teams that made it far, made deep runs. They were getting pressure on the quarterback. I mean, an edge rusher in today's NFL, and man, you could soundbite this if you want, is more important than a quarterback. And the San Francisco 49ers are evidence of that.
Hot take, the San Francisco 49ers, didn't win that game in the NFC Championship. But let's be fair, Christian McCaffrey was playing quarterback in the second half. So I love it. I mean, look, you got to be able to stop the run. You got to be able to pressure the quarterback. I saw Will Anderson Jr., Lance Zierlein comped him to DeMarcus Ware, I believe.
Yeah, I saw that one
so,
too.
I mean, if you can lock in DeMarcus Ware, I think he's a great bet to go as the first overall defender. Minus 250, like you said, a little bit. You got to pay some juice there,
Yep.
but all good if you think it's got an 80% chance of happening. I love it. So moving on to number 3, Brad. What's your third best bet of the NFL draft?
This one was weird to me. I just didn't agree with the price. And I could totally be wrong on this, but Jack Campbell to be the first linebacker drafted at plus 125. They have Drew Sanders as the odds-on favorite to be the first linebacker drafted. But let's break this down. Why Drew Sanders, right? Drew Sanders doesn't have anything where measurable-wise where Jack Campbell lacks. So our RAS is the relative athletic score. And if anybody has a chance to look it up, I promise you will be amazed. Absolutely amazed. They have Drew Sanders, Jack Campbell compared. A total RAS score of Jack Campbell is 9.98, where Drew Sanders is 8.97. It goes from everything from height, and everything that I'm going to mention, Jack Campbell rates better. Height, weight, vertical, broad jump, 40-yard dash, 10-yard split, 20-yard split, shuttle, 3-cone. Jack Campbell measures everything better there. And one thing that I like about Jack Campbell is he was the best player on the best defense in the country. Drew Sanders was a good player, and I'm not taking away from him, but if you have a quarterback for the best team who measures, and I'm calling the quarterback as a decent player, if you have a quarterback on the best team who measures the best, why would you not take them first? And I think a lot of NFL execs are going to think the same. And one thing I want to mention too, the big difference between the two is, Drew Sanders was an edge rusher, and he switched over to inside linebacker. Campbell's been doing this, and Campbell has great ball skills. Why I say that is, how many times have we watched Iowa, and Campbell pick the ball off from the quarterback? It allows you to play in the Tampa 2, let Campbell sit a little bit deeper if you need. I don't think Sanders can do that, at least not yet. Maybe they see upside, but there's no actual physical basis on why they're saying upside for Sanders. So I like Jack Campbell be the first linebacker drafted at plus 125.
Yeah, I love it. Freak athlete, Campbell. Do you have a team that you kind of see him potentially landing on?
I don't, because when I was doing this draft mocking, I actually had the linebackers going way low.
Yeah.
This is no knock on these guys. These guys are all freaks of nature, but I don't think Jack Campbell's one of the better linebackers to come out in some time. And this is disrespectful for the Buckus Award winner, but I think I have him going 25th, 24th.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense when there's so many good cornerbacks, and maybe we'll get to that in a little bit, but there's so many good edge defenders and so many good cornerbacks. You can see teams that are looking towards defense going with those positions as opposed to linebackers. So that makes sense, but I love him as the first overall linebacker. And what'd you say that price was, Brad?
Plus 125.
Yeah. Plus money coming back for the Buckus Award winner, like you said.
I locked that in earlier this morning. It was a little bit better price. Okay, when we talk about my next pick, I got a better price. I could have got a better price on Jack Campbell, but I waited, and it moved a little bit. But I still think plus 125 is pretty solid.
All good. And before we get into number 2, Brad, I kind of wanted to do a little little intermission question here. When you're putting these bets together and you're sort of putting together your portfolio of NFL draft bets, do you sort of line them up in a way that like you sort of see the draft going this certain way and all your bets kind of fall into that certain way of thinking? Like if you got like, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and then Will Anderson going 1, 2, 3, and you see the draft shaking out a certain way based on how those first 3 picks fall out.
Yeah.
Are you tailoring all your bets towards that, or are you spreading it out? Like, what do you kind of do?
What I try to do is trying to predict the draft is almost impossible. But like you said, you could pretty much predict draft scenarios. I try to predict what could happen in the drafts, like 3 different things, like a run on quarterbacks, or like that one year where we had the run on wide receivers. Was that 2 years ago? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had the run on wide receivers, a run on cornerbacks, because there are a lot of really good corners. I want to have all my picks that can fit inside that profile. That's why I don't do a lot of number betting until we get really, really, really close to the draft and I have good intel.
Gotcha. I love it. Okay, so number 2, your second best bet of the NFL draft. Lay it on us.
Yeah, this is the one that I locked in way early. It was at plus 140. Now it's plus 105. Dalton Kincaid, from Utah, the first tight end selected.
Yep. I love that.
That price that came out was mainly because of his injury that he sustained in the Pac-12 championship. He didn't play in the Rose Bowl, but I didn't actually think that the reason him not playing the Rose Bowl was because he was that injured. I just thought it was because he was saving himself for the draft. Like, what's the point? You literally just proved that you are the man, right? We talk about Michael Mayer, like, he's great. He's probably the best natural tight end in the draft. But I just think that Kincaid has a chance, with how versatile he is, to be a different kind of tight end. Think like a Darren Waller type. He's a great pass catcher. You can line him up pretty much anywhere on the field. You can't really do that so much with the dude at a Notre Dame, and giving me that kind of value, I think is pretty solid. And I do have a team. I have a couple teams that I thought he would be pretty solid fits in. I also don't have him going very high, which is totally fine. But if Bijan doesn't fall to Dallas, I have him at Dallas late in the draft. I have him pegged at Tampa Bay. Where else do I have him? And Cincinnati. Those are all late first round, so could be solid.
Yeah, I love Kincaid. I mean, he has that sort of, you don't want to compare him to Kelsey, obviously, but it feels like he has the best odds to sort of end up as that game breaker type of tight end. And if you're a team that's searching for that position in the draft, it makes sense to take a swing at upside.
Exactly.
And so with a guy like Kincaid, if they feel good about his injury, I think it was a back, right? If they feel good enough about that and that checks out, why wouldn't you take a shot on that? And so first tight end to be drafted, I like that at plus 105. That is getting a little low.
It is, especially from plus 140.
Yeah. So how do you feel about that sort of trend line, Brad? Is that something that you see as like, okay, like this is looking good, like the odds were at 140, now they're at 105, and this is a trend that I can sort of get in on, or how do you feel about that side?
Yeah, it depends on how much I trust my math, my handicapping, my studying. I don't mind. I just would be more grossed out if it went the other way. Like if it started to get to the plus 200s, because then there was something that I missed. Could be medical,
right.
Could be maybe just something that didn't sit right. But we can segue into my first pick, because I can answer that question as well. And this is more of me just tooting my own horn, because this pick is no longer available, but everyone was calling me a homer. Even at FSGA, people were calling me a homer for telling people to place this bet, and that's Bryce Young to go first overall. We got plus 350. I've been talking about this all over the internet, any show I possibly could have got on, but I wanted to add this more so, not just to toot my own horn, but to explain how draft betting works, and especially early in the draft process. So we talk about Bryce Young, and his biggest knocks on Bryce Young were size, obviously. I thought that if you take the first overall quarterback and you aren't 100% sure of their ability, not their size, and that's like Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, CJ Stroud, you better hope he pans out, because if you pass on a guy who shows the ability and shows a chance to be generational, and he hits and you passed on him and you mortgage your future, you could be out of your job. But let's talk about odds and how odds work. Bryce Young was plus 350 when CJ Stroud was minus like 285 or something. And I went on, I want to say it was BetMGM, and I talked about this where CJ Stroud wasn't minus 280 because CJ Stroud was the best quarterback here, or because the sports book were 100% sure that he was going first. What the sports books did was they positioned themselves to be in a smart position, at least what they thought was a smart position, just in case. Early in draft process, unless there's injury news or someone leaks it, line movements from sports books are not an indication of where someone is going to go. Too many times we see on the internet, and I'm not trying to be rude or call anybody out. Like, we're all in this together. It's us versus the books. But too many times this is my, I think I'm going to date myself. This is my 6th NFL draft. This is my 6th NFL draft. And I have even been fallen victim to this. Too many times we see on the internet, oh my God, CJ Stroud has moved from plus 200 to minus 350. CJ Stroud's going first. Bet that 5-unit max. And someone tweets that out. And then that becomes the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine later in the draft because you have actual information. But early in the draft, you have to protect yourself from situations like not falling into that. And that's more for people who don't cover it themselves or just want to kind of follow fun bets. They're protecting themselves early in the draft. And I was fairly confident that Bryce Young was going to go first. Even if he doesn't go first now at this point, the fact that he canceled all his meetings and only met with the Panthers, that's enough. That's enough for me to be confident at a bet that's sitting now, minus 1,500.
Wow. Isn't that crazy, dude? It's so funny how the draft works. Like at FSGA, this was February when CJ Stroud was the guy.
Yeah.
It would have been unfathomable. Like, if you would have told me back in February that Bryce Young would be minus 1,500 at this point, I would have been like, that makes no sense. CJ Stroud is the guy, because that's what the books are telling me. That's what everybody on Twitter is telling me. So I think that's such an interesting kind of point that we can look at. Maybe it's too late now, but for next year in the draft, like, just get the guy that's plus money early on in the process and see if there's an opportunity where it just swings in his favor, and then you could take the other guy now at plus money too. So all of a sudden you're sitting on both CJ Stroud and Bryce Young at plus money, and then you're locked in. So I love that idea and I love that sort of call out by you. Like, hey, just because things feel a certain way right now, like, there's so much smoke, so much nonsense going on. It's like, that's sort of the big question is, like, how do you know what to believe at this point in time? And so I think what you're kind of saying, Brad, and correct me if I'm wrong, is nobody knows. Like, the teams aren't going to tell us, what they're doing in February. Why would they do that? They might not even know. Their board might not even be set. So I love the fact that you just brought that up, and I really appreciate sort of the context there and sort of the overall knowledge that you just dropped on that in terms of the first overall pick and in terms of what we should be looking at like months in advance and what we should be looking at now. So how do you feel now about Bryce Young? If you can get him at minus 1,500, is that something where you're laying the mortgage down?
No, I did see someone post at minus 600, which I said that's pretty. Oh, it's minus 400. I said that's a fair value, not minus 1,500. I just couldn't, like, that's just too difficult for me. Maybe if any book is dumb enough to hang this in like 2 hours before the draft, you're gonna know 100% because you're gonna see enough leaks that Bryce Young's going first. Yeah, then you could lay the mortgage on it. I've been guilty of doing that. I did that with oh my gosh. I did that with was it Baker for Heisman? And obviously I never would tweet about that. Like, I would never say you guys do this, but when I got that leak that Baker was 100% getting it, he was like minus 1,200, and I just put whatever the max was on it. Like, they only won like $60 or $70, but hey, $60 or $70 that I didn't have before.
Amen. I love it, dude. Well, hey, Brad, this has been awesome, man. Let everyone know where they can follow your stuff if they want to reach out to you after this.
Absolutely, yeah. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Mr. Brad Thomas. Also, I recommend going to www.nbcsportsedge.com. You guys can find my articles there, and there's a ton of usable draft guides and draft rankings on there.
I love it. Well, hey, Brad, this has been awesome, dude. Really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we can get you on again soon so we can recap how these top 5 best bets went. We'll recap them in the show notes. Really appreciate you coming on, Brad, and we'll see everybody on the next episode of the Better Fantasy Show. Thanks so much for checking it out.
Thanks for having me.